DeFi is not mature as we would like it on Solana. We are not there. We stay here, we double down on Solana because we understand Solana and we are not done here yet. I'm quite bullish on the future of Solana. Everything that we went through makes it better for the future. We are just believers that this is what separates Solana from the Web2, which should be the future, not only of finance, but coordination. It's super cheap, super affordable. The tech is built the way that I could understand why it is the way it is.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Next Billion podcast, where we're talking to the entrepreneurs, the builders, the people that are making the world go around. And one of those people today is joining me from Marinade, when we're going to be talking about liquid state tokens and all of the craziness going on with Solana validators. But Michael, look, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you very much, George, for having me today. I've been a long-time fan of your podcast, so it's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. We're meeting the fans. It's great.
That's for sure.
Marinade's one of the major projects, so it's about time that we get you guys onto the podcast. I mean, Marinade's been around since forever. What's the story behind Marinade? What's been your journey thus far in Solana land?
Oh, in Solana land, in general, I would say that I got to crypto quite late compared to the others, but I adopted the values, the philosophy, the ideas of crypto very early in my life. So what set me up for where I am today, I think that happened a few years before I even discovered Solana and before I discovered crypto. So
you were in crypto before Solana, or you just liked the whole sort of privatized money thing?
Yeah, I mean, all my life, I valued a lot this concept of freedom, this concept of money, what it is, and so on. I very much valued freedom, especially in my early days. So I started building on the internet when I was, like 13, 14. Really, I built this first e-commerce site back then. And because internet it gave me this thing that people did not need to trust me, really. So I could build the sites, I could promote the sites. Back when I was 30, actually, I built the e-commerce site for my mom back then, who was on the maternity leave, right? And I needed to learn how it goes. So not only to build the site, but also how to promote it and so on. So based on this, I was able to make a bunch of multiple different businesses and help many other companies really in there. And since then, so this trustless thing of the internet, I just loved the concept. I loved it so much. And then for me, the crypto really started around like 2018, I would believe late 2018, when I entered the space as a buyer myself, right? For the first time as a buyer. It was late 2018.
A lot of us get in.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I remember that was late 2017. So like the good times kind of, and that was the peak.
The charts look like Mount Everest.
Exactly. So that was the time where I somehow got in. And then I remember 2018. Actually, there's a funny story because it was February 2018. I went for 2 weeks to the Mauritanian desert and with no signal, no internet at all. I came back,
wow.
50% off. I can just, throw it off. So that was the story back then when I was like, what is this crypto? Let's forget about this. I don't want to hear about this anymore. What a scam almost. And then a few years later, I came back, but this time from the technology perspective, really. So I wanted to understand what it is under the hood, what the technology can help us build, how it can progress the society as it is. And it was, I called it the DeFi summer. So the summer 2020, I played with a bunch of stuff on Ethereum back then. So, and then when it was like the peak of it, I remembered I needed to set my alarm clock at like 4 a.m. in the morning, trying to get the gas prices low enough for me, to not spend that much. And I was like, if this is the future of finance, I'm not sold. So then eventually I started to look into alternatives, and I saw Polkadot, I saw Kusama back then. And there was this local community in the Czech Republic building stuff and helping the community of Polkadot and Kusama. So I saw a bunch of projects there. I also helped run a bunch of validators in there, but still it was testnet. Like nothing was real, right? So compared to this experience on Ethereum when I needed to wake up, luckily for me, a few months later, I tried sending this transaction on this very new chain I've never heard of. It was like February 2021. And I hit the send button, I hit the approve, and it just happens. And it works like magic. And I'm like, I find it a bit suspicious. So I spoke back and forth just to test it. And it worked like every single time. I'm like, what is this? And I started to learn about this. So that was when I discovered Solana. And this magic moment for me was something I just fall in love with Solana. So I wanted this magic moment to preserve and to be introduced to as many people out there. So I started thinking, how can I contribute to the system, to this magical, lovely thing that's around? And I thought that there was this hackathon around February 2021, 2-3 days left to apply.
Step did as well. We did that one.
Right. And Mango, right? So yeah, that was this Solana Serum hackathon back then. We applied. I didn't know anything about Solana really at the time. So we just applied with this concept, this idea to do liquid staking, because I knew liquid staking from Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem. I knew it quite well. I understood it mainly as a DeFi user, that it makes my stake liquid and I can use it further in DeFi. But then as I figured like what Solana is and where maybe the pain points back there were on, I also understood how it can help on the infrastructure, on the network level side of Solana. So yeah, that's like when it all started, this concept and idea, and we signed up for the hackathon.
Yeah, well, look, I think that journey makes a lot of sense, right? Because I think a lot of people came to the concept of smart contract blockchains in general after DeFi summer. A lot of people using Ethereum, a lot of people paying like $80 to do a transfer. And then I think after that, a lot of people were also thinking to themselves quite reasonably, do we actually have to pay $80 per transaction? That seems kind of dumb. And so everyone was kind of looking for something, right? And you said you looked at the Polkadot ecosystem, looking at other ecosystems, Solana comes along. There's a lot of different L1s out there which are trying to do fast and cheap and that sort of thing. So was it the hackathon that was what put Solana above the rest? Or was it anything in particular that you really thought the technology or just the ecosystem or something like that had some potential? Because there was a lot of competitors at the time as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to me, it was really this UX moment. I'm much of a believer in speed and like quick feedback loops and so on. And the speed, to me, that was the only thing that actually played with the real money, but also was the closest to the Web2 experience back then. That's why like, what is this? Like, what's going on here? And then I started to learn about Solana and discover more things. And I just realized that it made such a great trade-offs, and the tech is built the way that I could understand why it is the way it is. It is set up, I believed in it. And so I wanted to play my part in it. And I thought that the decentralization and making it through staking would be providing this infrastructure so that for the years to come, for Solana can still thrive, can be healthy, and anybody can build on top of it that can still use it.
So why is decentralization important? And what are some of the hallmarks that we should look for? Because a lot of people will use the word decentralization. They'll go, oh, X is decentralized. What does that even mean? I guess from your perspective, what does decentralization mean for an L1?
Right. Yeah. So there are like many aspects, I would say. If we think about Solana as it is on the very high level, to me, it's like the global state machine, right? Global because it's run on 2,000 computers all across the world in 30 plus countries and so on. It's state machines accessible to anyone in the world really for free to read from it. And it takes less than $1 to update the state about 1,000 times. So it's super cheap, super affordable, and machine. So it processes thousands of transactions each second, and it's synchronized. So it's kind of amazing. But what separates really the blockchain from the Web2 database, that's the concept of decentralization. That's the concept that we don't have this single point of failure that can happen. So decentralization, to me, it's important because it's almost like a referee in a football game. Like nobody's blaming it unless something bad happens, right? So the concept of decentralization to me is really from different perspectives. How can we slice the network so that we can deny some attacks to it, and be it the number of nodes that are live, which most of people look at, but also like how much stake is in the countries, the service providers. So there are different ways how to slice decentralization. There is probably no single answer, but what I think it's important to say is that generally there is no value for decentralization. So there are almost no incentives for decentralization. So it's very unnatural. What Web2 makes a dominant players in Web2, it's the centralization. So decentralization is this aspect that we thrive for in Web3 world, but it's very unnatural and it's very hard to get there. And we need to fight quite hard for it to be there. And because even Marinade is not like super incentivized to make the network decentralized. But we are just believers that this is what separates Solana and blockchain from the Web2 world, which should be the future, not only of finance, but coordination. So I think that's why it is important.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there when you're talking about people only care about it when it becomes a problem. right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, if there's a problem with the chain or the validators or the number of nodes or something like that, when that becomes a problem, like I'm thinking, say, BNB with however many nodes it has that Binance predominantly runs, there's been instances in the past where they've gone down and people are like, oh, you should have more. And then, well, okay, well, why didn't you speak up beforehand, right? So it's kind of like this game of people only care when it becomes important to them. And I guess Solana started at zero, right? And now how many validators have we got around the world? You mentioned like 2,000, something like that.
Yeah, there are like 2,000. Back when we started, there were 600 only. That's where Marinade started back then, 2021. About 600, with 11 of those having those 33% stake concentrated of them. So back then, we thought, this is it. This is how we can make sure that the network is more healthy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Marinade. Like, how does Marinade improve this decentralization metrics for the chain, or make things better? Or why do we need a project like Marinade perhaps to step in and be that layer for this infrastructure? Because that's kind of how, and we can talk about liquid staking, but that's kind of how I see, projects like Marinade is that you're making the infrastructure layer much more digestible to people, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but if Marinade didn't exist, would we be caring as much about where we're staking, across all of these different nodes? It might still be quite hard to do. Tools might not be well advanced, whatever. So I guess it's kind of like a user interface for the actual like layer one infrastructure itself. But please, like, what's the deal with Marinade? Like, why do we need a Marinade?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And also a great segue from the decentralization topic, because like for the decentralization to progress, I think there are two main things needed to put it in place. Like, one is having some transparency and metrics in the open for the people to check. And two is having some tooling and incentives to progress on the decentralization part. So these two need to be in place. And that's why Marinade came about back then. So I would start talking about Marinade from the perspective of what's the role of Solana staking as it is on a very high level. And Solana staking, it's like a representative democracy, kind of. You can imagine you have those 2,000 parties on Solana state, right? And you have 500,000 citizens owning SOL, and they can delegate the SOL to those parties. And with delegating the SOL, they basically transfer the voting power on those nodes that then process and confirm transactions on the network. So you can delegate them this voting power. So people still today, I think, face three main fears of Solana staking as it is. So one is that when you are about to stake SOL, when you are about to delegate your SOL to some validator, there are 2,000 of those. And it's hard to pick just one.
Yeah. Why 960 validator is instead of 274? Like, I don't know why.
Exactly. So this is the first hurdle, I would say, in the staking UX, really, that there are just too many. And unless you have favorite community, a title, or yield, it's hard to pick. And they all look great on paper, but tomorrow they can go offline, they can change commission. So there's this second problem, this anxiety, this constant not knowing, am I getting a yield or what's happening, really? So that's the second problem, really, that you don't know unless you check for yourself, really. And then the third thing, because all those two problems, that's why many people reverted to staking with the OGs, with the huge validators, or even on the exchange. And that's a third problem, or fear. That's a shame, because they don't feel great about it, but it's the safest way probably to play it, because you don't know the others and you don't want to lose on your yield. So Marinade tried to tackle all these user-facing problems, really, from the UX perspective, and also from the philosophical perspective of not staking with the biggest. So what Marinade introduced is this automated delegation strategy. What Marinade does is that it monitors all Solana validators on the network and delegates to the best performing ones on your behalf. So you're not staking with one only, you're staking actually with 100 plus validators on the network. Doing this, it's automatically rebalanced. So you don't need to care for yourself. It's automatically checked for yourself, and it's put where the best yield and the best decentralization is. You don't need to pick one validator because it's automatically picked for you. And probably the best part and the hidden part is that it skips the biggest validators and it stakes rather on the smaller validators, the other reliable validators. So that was really the concept that Marinade introduced to masses, which I'm a big believer that this can progress Solana network health as it is and improve the decentralization. So that was a main thesis. And we wrapped it back then into liquid staking. So that's what we introduced to Solana as the first one back in summer 2021.
And liquid staking as well. This term gets thrown around a lot, LSTs, and people being like, oh, institutional people. I think, Ethereum kind of coined the term, and exactly the same sort of concept applies on Solana though, right? But the idea is that when you stake on a node, usually it might take some time to undelegate your stake, right? Whereas liquid staking, you get a coin or a token which represents your stake, and then you go and do stuff. Would that be a reasonable characterization of liquid staking and why it exists? Like, it just makes your stake more movable and useful in the rest of the chain.
Yes, exactly. So it's the way that you put it beyond what I described previously, that you stake to not one usually, but to multiple validators automatically. For you as a user, you make your stake liquid. And what it means, it started back on Ethereum. So back then, you could not withdraw the staked tokens. That was one thing.
And there's a queue, I think on Ethereum, it's like a 40-day queue or something insane that some of these staking facilities have. It's like, what? That's insane.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that since Ethereum compared to Solana, it's not delegated proof of stake, it's proof of stake. So for you to stake ETH, back then, you needed to get 32 ETH, not more, not less, and you needed to spin up your own node, basically to stake it. That was it. There is no delegation at all. That's why we've seen this adoption of liquid staking over there to be much, much higher than on Solana, because on Solana, it was built in the protocol. So it's just, you can take your one sol and delegate it to any validator, and boom, you're staking. So that's really the fundamental difference to me between the two approaches.
Just quickly on that point as well, if I stake to a validator, what happens if the validator blows up, and can they run away with my money? I mean, we've seen a lot of these DeFi hacks and different things right in the past, but is that a reasonable risk when I'm delegating a vote on a Solana validator?
So the worst that can happen on Solana validator is that you would lose your yield. That's really the worst case, unless there is something wrong within the Solana core protocol for sure. But staking is way, way secure than interacting with DeFi for sure. That's also why 97% of Solana staked, it's staked the traditional, regular native staking way, and only 3% is staked the liquid staking way, where you can further use it in DeFi, you can borrow against it, you can provide liquidity. So the worst that can happen to you is really losing the yield today.
Right. So I can always take my stake, even if the validator shuts down. The blockchain is literally just saying, okay, well, we actually don't need that validator to be online for you to, withdraw your delegation to another validator. So I guess to reinforce for the people at home, like, that's why native staking and validator staking in general is so great, because, even if the validator blows up or runs away, like, you can still get your coins back. They can't just like spin up a validator, tell it's you the best thing in the world, and then run away with all the coins. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So liquid staking, I guess, you mentioned the 97.3. Why is that? So 97% of staking on Solana takes place through native staking, and that's where you delegate your voting weight to a particular node, a validator. And then the liquid staking option, where it might be spread between a number of different validators, that seems like it's way less in terms of usage and portability in the rest of DeFi. Why do you think that is? Is that, I don't know, is it just an onboarding problem that we need to solve? Or, I don't know, curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, so I would say that there are, again, multiple factors to it, why it's that low, the adoption. And I mean, us, Marinade grew from 0 to 6 million SOL in 3 months back in 2021. And we kind of stay there almost like up until now. So we've been asking this same question ourselves, the users, the institutions. Why is that? Why the adoption is not bigger? And I think mainly it comes down to some test of a time. We've been around for more than 2 years without any problem at all so far, knock on wood, but yeah. So still, I think that it's got a new concept. That's one. People need some time before they feel comfortable to start using it. 2, the DeFi, probably I would say it's not mature as we would like it on Solana. So we did a great job after the FTX. Still, I would say that we are not there. There were times when we were at 6 million SOL back then, and additional MSOL, you had no place to use it really in Solana DeFi. We were the number one thing that people would use on Orca, on Radium, pretty much everywhere across the space. On Solana, we were maxed out. And so even if people wanted to use Marinade to get MSOL, this liquid stake token, to then further use in DeFi, there were just no place. really. So that was the problem. So it's kind of chicken and egg problem. Like, do we need the adoption of liquid staking, or do we need to grow the DeFi? Not super sure, but it influences each other. That's one part. The second part is probably still the aversion of the smart contract risk. That's named a lot between people. But the same smart contract risk is not only on Solana, it's on other chains as well when they do the liquid staking. So once again, I believe that since the liquid staking does not provide that much of a value on Solana compared to other chains when the staking is broken, and it's only way how you can delegate. I think that's really the reason why it's not worth for the people to put Sol in liquid staking. Because if you look at it really objectively, the yield is more or less the same. As long as you watch the validators you stake to, you can get even better yield. There might be some tax implications. So for some folks and the regulatory reasons, they might still consider it a swap and not really a deposit, which we believe it is rather a deposit. And then third, there's this smart contract risk that for some people, it's just unbearable.
That's a good point. And first that comes to mind in maybe proving out this idea or the thesis that maybe people are or not willing to stake natively on chain. I mean, the biggest example of that's Lido, right, on Ethereum. And Lido is however many, billion TVL or whatever that they've got over there. So clearly the thesis is that people are willing to delegate their stake to some sort of entity, right? And maybe it's decentralized organization or whatever, like Lido or Marinade. But that's the proof of concept, right? So I guess maybe is how you guys look at it. Like, hey, look, these guys have proven that people are willing to delegate stake and do this kind of stuff. It's maybe just a matter of onboarding. Because I think, what's the percentages for Solana in terms of the SOL that exists versus the SOL which is actually staked anywhere, doing anything? It's probably quite a mismatch, right?
Yeah, it is. I think compared to ETH, I think it sits on ETH around 25%. On Solana, others around 70%, if I remember correctly. So it's a much more solid state of it, much more or less so it's liquid state. That's the comparison.
And, I think of these ETFs as well. And I think there is a SOL sort of fund or ETF or grayscale or something like that where institutional investors can get exposure to the SOL price. But ultimately, those guys should be staking that. If there is actual underlying SOL being held by an institutional investor, it kind of doesn't make sense not to stake, right? The chain that's how coins get into circulation. That's how circulating supply increases, right? So if you're not staking, it's kind of, you are missing out. There is yield there, which you're just missing out on usually.
Yeah, exactly. There was this big great moment for us. I believe that was 2022, fall last year, when MSOL got listed on Coinbase, actually. So this is great because people can now enter the Solana position already in this staked version. So it's this super SOL kind of, this MSOL thing. It's Solana bearing the 7% interest over a year, or rather not losing to the inflation, as you put it. So it's just superior to the SOL token. And now with MSOL, you can pretty much use it anywhere in the Solana DeFi ecosystem. So we are asking ourselves, if you're using DeFi, there is just no way around why you should not use MSOL over SOL.
Well, that's it. If you have any sort of position in SOL, there's literally no reason to not be earning a yield on that SOL. Even if you're an order book exchange, right, and you have an order book for USDC to SOL, you could also have a USDC to MSOL. And then anyone who has a position in that MSOL, hey, that position's at least growing over time at a 7% yield or something annually. It makes so much sense, right? Because it's literally similar effort for an exchange or a DeFi protocol or anything to integrate SOL as it is to MSOL. So I guess, is that sort of a customer acquisition strategy where it's getting these protocols to use MSOL as the default unit?
Yeah, exactly. That's the long-term idea, to have it as a unit of account, that you should use MSOL to borrow against, to provide liquidity, but also to pay for transactions, also to buy NFTs. And we are getting there, slowly we are getting there, but this just makes sense so that people can use something that makes interest on their wallet.
I get it. And I guess the counter to that would be, hey, I don't want to take smart contract risk, or what happens if, you guys with the MSOL token do something bad to the token and then, my stake's not worth anything. So I guess the concept there to talk about is the Marinade DAO itself, and how does that work? And is it decentralized? Is it not? What are the sort of risk profile that people might need to be aware of?
That's a great question. And that's actually what probably separates Marinade from the rest of protocols out there on Solana, because we took the hard path and the difficult path back then when there were just a bunch of people on this Discord. When we participated in the hackathon, we didn't know each other. But once we participated, there were tens, maybe hundreds of investors wanting to invest in Marinade. And given my previous experience in the startup world where I used to fundraise, I made some mistakes. I did not want to repeat them. So I said, if we're going to make this, if Marinade is going to be the public infrastructure to progress on Solana to make it healthy, robust, and decentralized, we cannot take VC money. That would be totally against it.
Yep.
We need to make it our own way. So we decided to go on and be bootstrapped. So we declined, we rejected any VC out there. Marinade did not do any private sale, public sale token whatsoever. And it's completely bootstrapped. We just built. And it took us 6 months with the support of Solana and Serum grants back then. But on $80K budget, we launched Marinade back then.
Amazing.
And we thought to ourselves, either we make it or we don't make it.
Yeah.
But let's try. We also had offers from Lido back then to be the Lido for Solana. I can disclose it right now, I think for the first time. But we made it our own way and we succeeded because in 1 month, we got break even and we could pay ourselves, the team, the contributors, which was super needed.
How did that work as well? Was that because you guys were running validators yourselves, or was there a transaction fee for people depositing in the pool, or how did you bootstrap revenue?
So not only we did not take any VC money, we also felt like to stay completely objective, we did not run any validator at all. And even now, Marinade does not run any validator node on the network to stay objective, to support the network. And the way that Marinade takes fees, it's this 6% performance fee on MSOL, so on all the staking rewards. Once the validator gets their cut, we would split it 6% for the Marinade DAO and 94% in the value accrual for MSOL price over SOL. So that's basically how we got to this break even, that there were millions of SOL in Marinade that would just make fees that we could pay the team back then from the fees. That's how it got bootstrapped. And a few months later, we progressed and started the Marinade DAO. We launched the token really in a fair launch mechanics. So the only way how you could get MNDE, the governance token, was by contribution. So you could not buy it at some discount pre-sale price, something like this. You needed to contribute either as a core contributor at the protocol or as with liquidity back then. Since we bootstrapped liquidity over there, we incentivize the DeFi usage of MSOL and so on. So that's how it all started back then. Today, we are looking at 20% of the token being in circulating supply, and the rest of it stays in the treasury, which is up to the MND holders, up to the Marinade DAO to decide of their use.
Wow. And look, I massive respect for launching that way and having the philosophical conviction to be able to say, no, we're going to go about it in the proper way. No pre-sales, no this and that, no special token prices, all that. So they're very rare. In fact, I don't think there's many projects I can think of that ever really do those sorts of things, especially when you're launching at a time when everyone is doing the opposite of that, right? There was $100 million IDOs going down all over the place. And, and then here you guys are launching in this way. I bet there was maybe some thought, is this the right way to be doing it? Hey, we could, if we just did it this way, maybe we would have more ammunition to be able to do everything we wanted to. There was maybe a bit of contention there, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. At the time, it felt like the best idea to do it this hard, difficult way with no VC money. For sure, 1 year or 2 years later, there is probably not a week where we're not thinking about, did we do it the right way? Did we set the foundation the right way? Because it hurt. I can tell you that it hurt for sure, since we did not have much of a reserve of any VC money and so on. So we need to make up for it. But I think that's the right way to make sure that Marinade is healthy. Because once again, if this provides this common level public infrastructure good on Solana to anybody build upon, it needs to be decentralized itself. So that's why I'm a big believer in this.
And wow, like you also mentioned about Lido potentially wanting to acquire you guys in the early days. Well, it now seems that I saw Lido had a vote recently that maybe they continue supporting Solana stuff, maybe they don't. Ultimately, I think the lesson learned there has been that Marinade's been able to compete at the top level of anything to do with staking on Solana, and projects coming in just haven't really been able to get the traction for that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Marinade has maybe struck a chord with the Solana community particularly, rather than, say, outside projects that do a similar thing elsewhere? They just sort of weren't able to get the traction.
I think that what helped us was ethos, really, that we said, no VCs, this is bootstrap, this is community bootstrap thing that will be owned by everybody in the ecosystem. That was really the foundation that was previously not seen around. I would say this was it, and community fortunately really resonated with how we set up Marinade from the get-go, with the ideals, the philosophy, how we want to do stuff. So I think that was what really helped. Also that we are Solana native. So it's this motherboard. I'm a big believer that something like liquid staking or staking should be decided by the native Solana ecosystem community, and not really like ERC20 holders deciding over Solana network. This is a clash, and all the investors or all the people talking to us understood it back then. So I would say that this was it, and we knew that this is going to be a battle, almost like a David versus Goliath, and we knew it's almost impossible to beat them because they have this huge treasury. They know how to do stuff. They're coming from something battle tested from Ethereum, and they are just going to replicate it on Solana. But we were like, for the fun, let's reject the offer to build Lido or Solana ourselves, and let's do it. Let's see how it plays out. And fortunately, we are super grateful for the Solana community, for the projects around, that they got the message, they understood it. And I think that's why we are the number one protocol out there on Solana today.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly paid off, and I think, people recognize that. And, when protocols in Solana have tried to venture, like I think Magic Eden, when they went multi-chain and stuff, it never worked out. A lot of protocols have tried that. There's some lenders as well that have gone multi-chain. They thought it would be this, amazing new land of users and, daily active users for their protocol. Never really became a thing because it seems that people really like using the things that are native to their ecosystem, and that sort of a lot of people that are in the Solana ecosystem or in the Ethereum ecosystem or in whatever ecosystem, Cosmos, they kind of just like using the products in that because they know it, and maybe they use a whole bunch of different protocols there already. But that seems to be the vibe, right? Where I guess sort of Solana people are kind of like, hey, I know Marinade, like I'm into Solana, I'm buying NFTs all day or whatever. Marinade's got our backs for Solana, and that's good for everything that I'm doing as well. So maybe I should support Marinade.
Yeah, exactly. And you struck the chord on that. I think from my previous startup, I took two main lessons learned. One was already mentioned, just doing or raising VC money when we didn't really need it. So it only extended the time of the death, I would say, of the startup because we didn't really need it. The second thing was just doing too many things. So the lack of focus really is the killer to me out there. And that's why all the investors around Marinade were like saying, why don't you guys go after this other chain? Why don't you do this multi-chain? Since you nailed it on Solana, what's next for you? What other chain's next for you? And we always responded, no, we stay here. We double down on Solana because we understand Solana and we are not done here yet. And we focus on this. That's why Marinade sticks to its core of doing staking, of doing decentralized staking. That's why we didn't build the DEX, the AMM, the lending protocol, or whatnot. We could have, but we felt like that this is our core. That's how people understand us. That's how we are transparent for the other protocols around us. And this is really our strength, that we stick to the core and we build upon it step by step.
Yeah, this question, what's next? I don't know, it kind of annoys me because it's kind of like you're just assuming that this is just a buzzword and we're like, oh, cool, yes, we like blue sneakers today. And then, tomorrow we're all about red sneakers. It's like, yeah, but everything we said about blue sneakers, that's still, 100%, we're on board. We like the blue team, but actually now we're doing this other thing. It can be a little bit weird when people are like, oh, are you sort of leaving behind a lot of what you said previously to go and do this new thing? But that's sort of the nature of DAOs, isn't it? Where perhaps you just get a lot of voices. And how do you deal with that, right? You get a million different chattering voices. Hey, do this. Hey, blah, blah. Why don't you do that? How do you guys focus and make sure that you align all of this decentralized organization called a DAO?
I would say that we come back together the original plan quite often to make sure that we stay on course. So we've put it on paper, we've put there the values, what we stand for, what's the objective long-term wise. That's why we started Marinade 2 years ago. That's why we keep it running at these times. And that's why we would like to be around in the next couple of years or decades to come, because we stick to the core mission. So that's what drives us. And if building the new AMM or doing the lending protocol or doing that does not match, there are better people suited for this to build this, and we would much rather to support them. That's why we don't run a validator ourselves as well, because it's, again, we strive for making the community and the network healthy. We are supporting the validators. We don't want to compete with them. So all this together, we try to stick really to the core, to the basics. Yes, we are receptive to feedback. We change. It's also why we recently launched this new set of product out there. Without this being receptive to feedback, we wouldn't have even launched it. That's where we are. And it also kind of eats from MSOL, from liquid staking, this new product that we just launched. So it's an interesting concept to see. But for the goal, for the mission that we want to accomplish, this was absolutely needed.
So what are those products? Is this, are we talking about native staking and direct stake? And
yeah, I think that the Marinade Native product that we launched about 2 months ago is really a game changer. And also it's the only possible on Solana thing, finally, that we can label it like this as well.
I did not expect native stake on Marinade as well. When I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. Good on you guys.
Yeah, since we were talking about the staking market as it is, the whole, it's just huge. It's $8 billion worth of in the staking market. And only 2% of it, it's now in MSOL, in liquid staking. So we've been asking ourselves, why is that? And I've been talking to multiple users, the founders, and institutions, mainly the institutions, because they don't use liquid staking. What are the barriers? What's keeping them from using Marinade and MSOL? And it all came down to the points that we already went through, mainly the smart contract risk, the possible tax trigger, that they would rather a native stake.
I think everyone just has like PTSD of DeFi blowing up, and they're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. That was their words, actually. We are here for the long term. We don't play DeFi. We are not DeFi degens. We stick to something. So given our mission, again, our vision, what to do with the network is that we want to decentralize it. We want to keep it healthy. Even if it looks like healthy, you can lose it one day. It happened with Hetzner back then when 40% of nodes on Solana were suddenly shut down. That was 20% stake in total. And nobody kind of expected this, but it happened. So we cannot take things for granted. So basically, why we launched Marinade Native is the answer how to make decentralized the rest of Solana staking. This 97%, that's native staked. So what we did with Marinade Native is that we matched the very same risk exposure as people are having when they're stake their SOL the native way on a specific validator. There is no exchange, SOL for MSOL. There is no smart contract risk involved, really, because it builds on top of the native staking. What it does, really, is that there is this proxy that delegates on your behalf, and it picks not one, but again, those 100 plus best performing validators, and it keeps it running for you so that you don't need to watch it for yourself. And this taps into the very same goal that we had with MSOL and liquid staking. It just decentralized the network. It's great for the network. It's great for the user, because you don't need to put everything in one basket. Once again, the validator can shut down, they can change commission. You can do what we previously offered only through MSOL and some exposure to DeFi. Now you can do it completely without smart contract risk, which is super new. And you don't pay any fees. So we charge 6% performance fee on MSOL. Since there is no smart contract at all, there is 0% fees on using Marinade Native. So the only fee to pay there is with the commission to validators. And also all the rebalancing, all the transactions where we need to rebalance the stake between the epoch based on what validators is the best performing. This is covered from the Marinade DAO treasury as well. And those are like hundreds, thousands of transactions that we need to run. And that's why it's only possible on Solana, because otherwise it would cost us close to $1 million already.
Amazing. That's awesome. Okay, so it's matching the native stake risk profile and spreading it between, is it 100 validators in the current?
At the moment, yeah, it's like 123 validators. Yeah, that's what we pick. It's based on the performance. So every epoch, every 2 days, we would look at if the validators are online, where is the data center, like where is it placed? So decentralization plays a factor in there. What's the yield? What's the commission? Has something changed or not? And based on this, we put a score on a validator, and those top 120 score performers get the stake assigned. And it's all permissionless, which is great. So you don't need to shake hands with Marinade to get stake. You can spin up the validator, and as long as it's performant, as long as you have some competitive commission to it, then you can be staked by Marinade kind of in the open, in the transparent, public way.
Amazing. So you've been talking to a lot of institutional investors as well, right? So they noted that this lack of native staking, contract risk, these sorts of things, this was a problem. Do you think that this is the solution to that? Do you think that they're going to change their mind? Have you had any conversations there?
Yeah. We are in touch with a lot of them, with probably the major players, major Solana holders in the ecosystem. And I can say, compared to liquid staking and MSOL, the distribution strategy or acquisition strategy, it's completely different to what we were used to. So there is some learning curve that we are going through. The institutions, either they might have their own validator. So we need to take them like from the own validator and explain them for the sake of the network. Everybody will be better off if you diversify your stake and not stake everything on your own node. Then there are some that have their SOL in the custodian services. So actually they would love to use Marinade Native, but as long as we are not in the tooling, they cannot really. So working on that front as well. But generally, they started talking to us finally. With liquid staking and MSOL, they didn't want to talk about this at all. With Marinade Native, they're like, aha, so you can, on my behalf, stake to not one, but 100 plus best performing validators. You automatically rebalance it, you pay the cost for me, and it's the very same risk exposure as if I'm staking to those 2-3 validators. Okay, I'm listening, what we can do together. So finally, this is a great sign, and it's been in live for only 2 months now, but actually we just crossed 2 million SOL in Marinade Native right now. So there are some initial signs of traction, and I hope to see it growing because once again, there are hundreds of millions SOL that should be staked the automated way over the manual way. It's better for the user, it's better for the network. So hopefully we'll see quite some growth.
Amazing. And especially if you're one of these exchanges that offer staking as a service, right? And not only do you earn an amazing yield with native stake, but you also don't have the risk or the problems of having to run your own validators. Because a lot of the exchanges, they have to run validators for all these different chains, right? So it can be a headache. So I guess for them, maybe it makes a lot of sense. And people like Binance or Kraken or these other people maybe come to mind for that. So, and there's also the direct staking, right? And there's also the MSOL itself and how it's been currently functioning. So what are the current sort of product split and how are they different on Marinade right now?
So a few months ago, we introduced something called the directed stake. So previously, if you would stake with Marinade, it would stake on those 100 plus algorithmically chosen validators. And we understood that even being 100% algorithmically driven is not the most decentralized way, actually, because it's just some set of rules. And we liked some human factor in those rules. So that's why we introduced the concept of direct stake, where people can pick a validator to stake to through Marinade, basically. So you can assign some weight, you can assign some stake to a specific validator to support them specifically. So now the delegation strategy of Marinade is of 40% decided of this directed stake and 60% is decided based on performance of the validators. So of this 40%, there are MNDE token and MSOL token holders deciding where the stake goes. So we're talking about 70,000 MSOL holders that are deciding where the stake goes instead of one algorithmic strategy. So I think it's just a great mix, and it allows people that previously did want to use Marinade, but they did not want to lose all their stake if they would put it to Marinade. So this shifts the perspective a little, and now the validators that previously self-stake or some institutions can finally give some weight, give some vote to where the stake should go and make it either MSOL or native.
So a lot of these different projects, they have their own validators. And this is something that we're sort of considering as well at Step is, how can we utilize some of these tools? And do you think the future of Solana is that we might see more of these individual validators spinning up from all these different dApps? or like we've got 2,000 or so validators on the network. Is that going to go to 10,000? Like, what's the sort of end goal here, or are we good? Like, do we not need anymore? Is there like a sort of diminishing returns at some point?
So I think currently at the 2,000 validators, it's also important to remember that the pie is only as big of how much staking rewards can those validators get and what's in it. So if you double the size of validators, like there are going to be less left for those new validators on the network. So currently with 2,000, we have about 1 million SOL a month that goes in commissions to those validators to feed them. There are 3 main clusters of Solana validators. So you have 100% commission validators. So you have about 200 of those. So 10% of all Solana validators charge 100% commission. So they get actually most of it. And then you have 10% commission validators that are supported by the Solana Foundation grant program and so on. And then you have the rest, I would say the community independent validators charging anywhere from 0 to 9% commission. So once again, I think there's enough at the current SOL price, which drives all the economics. It's enough. And we don't want to have more validators just for the sake of the number. I am a believer in that we should have quality node operators. And if we want to have quality node operators, they cannot only break even, but they should get some reasonable profit out of it. So at the moment, we have 400 validators that are actually underwater on Solana that don't make enough to cover even the costs. So I would believe that 2,000 really at the current certain conditions are maxed out.
So we mentioned DeFi as well, MSOL. I guess wrapping up here, like I always say to people, like, what do they think the future of DeFi is? And given that MSOL is actually it is the biggest DeFi asset on Solana. It's used mostly everywhere. We've just said that it should be used even more places, but what do you think the future is? We're coming to the end of the year now. We've got Breakpoint coming up. We've got hackathons going on. We've got more people like trying to get DeFi up and running again on Solana. But what's your take on where we're going on that front?
Yeah, I think the great shift is really the understanding that we as the Solana ecosystem are not doing copycat projects anymore. That we understood that the network Solana is that specific that we can build solutions that can only be built on Solana really. And we've seen those around with like compressed NFTs, with Helium around and so on. So this is great to see. And I think that after FTX, the DeFi, it just needs some time to basically come back again to where it used to be for people to trust it again. And with this year, with the network operating so well, even with some of the NFT mints and so on, I'm quite bullish on the future of Solana. I really believe that everything that we went through makes it better for the future. And here we are building with the next set of things that are quite different. And that's where I hope that we can really own on what makes Solana unique, the technology, everything around it, the community. So I'm bullish, I'm positive on the future, but it'll take some time to recover.
I love to hear it. So, well, look, thank you so much for your time today, Michael. It's been a pleasure having you on. Marinade, as we have been discussing, it's one of the OG projects on Solana. Go and check it out. Where should people go if they want to learn more? Blogs, Twitter, websites? Where should we shill?
Yeah, head over to Marinade Finance. That's the site where you can try out both the liquid staking MSOL and the smart contract-less solution, Marinade Native. You should also follow us on Twitter. We release blogs and we are on Discord for sure. And just in 11 days, actually, we are starting this season called Marinade Earn, where there is this 90-day incentive program where we are going to match MND with your staked SOL, either through MSOL or Native. So check it out and hopefully see you around to decentralize Solana and make it thrive for the years to come.
Absolutely. Love to hear it. Go and check out. We'll put the links down below. But again, thanks so much for coming on board. Everyone go and check out Marinade and get staking that SOL. Why not? It's the place to go. So thanks, guys. See ya.
Cheers.